Yo, what's happening everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon GO video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's jump right into it. Alright, so for today's video, I wanted to talk about one aspect of Pokemon GO which I believe is the core of this game. It is one of those things that if Niantic were to cultivate it and make it a much better experience, then it's going to contribute to the longevity of Pokemon GO. And the reason why I say that is because for the past several years since they introduced this aspect of the game, it has been the one thing that has kept a lot of Pokemon GO players continuing to play the game. So what is this thing that I'm talking about? It is, of course, without a doubt, raid battles. When it comes to Pokemon GO, it is all about raiding. All of the Pokemon that you catch, all the candy that you collect, it is contributing to you doing better in raids. When it comes to legendary Pokemon and some of the most powerful Pokemon, you could only get them from raid battles, which is why this is probably the most important aspect of Pokemon GO, and I wanted to make a whole video dedicated to why Niantic needs to cultivate it. Now, there are three specific reasons why I believe everyone does raid battles in Pokemon GO, and these are the things that Niantic needs to be aware of if they want to make raid battles more engaging and a lot more rewarding. So what is the first thing that has a lot of players motivated to raid? It is, of course, resources. You get a whole bunch of Stardust and experience, but you also get rare candies as well as candies of the Pokemon that you're raiding. So when it comes to legendary Pokemon, it's not as simple as just getting one of them. If you want to use that Pokemon, you have to power it up. And you get the resources for powering it up by doing more raid battles of that raid boss. So this is a very key aspect of why people continue to raid the same boss every time it comes back in raids. It's not just enough for them to get one of these and just call it quits. They need to get the candies, they need to get the Stardust in order to max it out so that they could use that in a different raid. That is essentially the core gameplay loop for raid battles. You collect legendaries, you do more of those legendaries to power them up, and then you use those legendaries that you caught and powered up to battle other legendaries, and you repeat the process. And I really do think that this aspect of raid battles is why it is so successful and why it's so relevant even to this day. Now, the second reason why players continue to do raids is, of course, perfect IVs. When it comes to the legendaries, getting perfect IVs is essential for using them in stuff like the Master League in the Go Battle League. And it's kind of the natural progression because once you reach a certain point within your Pokemon GO journey, you start to care about min-maxing or getting the most efficient version of a single Pokemon. So when it comes to certain legendaries like Mewtwo, Rayquaza, Groudon, and Kyogre, and some of these meta Pokemon, it's not enough to just get those Pokemon and to max them out. You're also looking for the best possible IVs so that you could dish out the most damage and survive the most attacks. So because of that, perfect IVs is one of the main motivators why people continue to do raid battles even after collecting the raid boss. And then the third thing is a little bit more vain, but it is the shinies of those legendaries. The reason why people continue to do raids for a certain legendary Pokemon is because they want to get the shinies for those legendary Pokemon. And it's not enough to get yourself a shiny of that Pokemon, you might also want to go for the Shundo. That ultimately leads to a lot of players doing a ton of raids even if they have a 100% IV because they also want to get a perfect IV or something close with the shiny form of that Pokemon. It does require a lot of luck. It is a very big RNG based game, and I think that's something that Niantic will never change. But really, it's what contributes to a lot of players doing a whole bunch of raids. They want to get high IV shinies. So yeah, these are the three main reasons why I believe a whole bunch of Pokemon GO players continue to actively raid even to this day. And I think there's a lot of ways Niantic could cultivate and make these experiences better by actually focusing in on these three areas. But I also think it comes down to gameplay. When it comes to Pokemon GO's raiding, it really hasn't seen much change over the past several years. And I think Niantic could do a lot more to make raiding a lot more dynamic and a lot more engaging, and also give players a lot of quality of life improvements so that they can actually complete those raids even if they live in a low population area. I think one of the biggest gripes over the past couple of years that players have had is the nerfing of remote raids. The introduction of remote raid passes actually added a lot of those quality of life improvements that made raiding a lot better, but Niantic took them away mainly because they wanted to engage players in a lot more outdoor based play, and I've talked ad nauseum about that. But I think there's a lot of other things that Niantic could do to actually make raiding a lot more enjoyable. First and foremost, they need to make raiding in a way where it could actually be dynamic depending on your level. Because there's a lot of players who have accessibility issues or they just simply cannot raid. They rely very heavily on remote raid passes, or they only engage in legendary raid bosses that they can solo, and there's very few of those. And I think because of that, anytime Niantic makes decisions like nerfing remote raid passes, it ends up blowing up in their face because a lot of players rely on these certain mechanics in order to actually get some of the Pokemon that people who live in urban areas are able to get freely. So I think one thing that Niantic should consider is, like I said, dynamic stats. Like, if you go up against a raid boss and you do not have a lot of players in the raid lobby, then you should kind of scale down those raid bosses so that it is actually doable for those players. Maybe they could limit the amount of resources that they could get as a reward, or maybe the Pokemon will have a much lower IV floor. I really do not know what they could do here, but I really do think there needs to be some kind of change in terms of game balancing, because it's extremely difficult for players who live in rural areas and people who have disabilities to actually engage with this core aspect of the game. And another thing that I feel like Niantic needs to cultivate is having better rewards. Over time, we have seen some changes to rewards with raid battles, but I feel like they could do a lot more. Like, for example, you get those battle achievement cards at the end of the raid that highlights something that you did that sets you apart from the rest of the raid group. There should be something you get from getting those. Like, if you were to deal the most damage in the raid battle, then maybe you could get extra Premier Balls, or an additional rare candy, or an XL candy, what have you. I really feel like this is something that Niantic should explore, because when it comes to raid battles, eventually people get all the candies for a legendary Pokemon, or they get too many rare candies for them to even use, and because of that they start to fall off from raiding. I'm certainly at that point. I really feel like when it comes to raids, there's just not a single legendary aside from maybe Mewtwo that I actually care about. And the reason for that is because at this point I have most of the Pokemon that I want to have maxed out, fully maxed out. So there really is no reason for me to do a bunch of these raids. And then finally, there is the progression aspect of Pokemon GO's raiding scene. It's something that Niantic needs to continue to cultivate. And the best way they could do that is by adding more challenging raids. And I'm not just saying having raids be in-person only and level 6, which is what they did with Elite raids. I'm talking about stuff like the Shadow Legendary raids, or something like the Mega Evolution raids for Legendaries. Those were really difficult when they first came out, and they required players to give it their all, and I really enjoyed that sort of content. It really has been a long time since we felt any kind of progression with raid battles, and I really do think that what they need to do is come up with something that could be extremely challenging but also equally very rewarding. Get players motivated with the rewards and some certain Pokemon, but also make those raid battles extremely difficult so that there is a sense of progression. People are trying to progress, get better Pokemon, power up those Pokemon so that they could defeat these harder raids. So yeah, I really do think that raiding is very important for Niantic to continue to develop, and it's about time that they did so, because they're creating some interesting content in Pokemon GO. Like, Dynamax Pokemon and Max Battles is certainly very interesting content, and an argument can be made that this is the future of Pokemon GO, that they should put all their chips into Max Battles, and then essentially phase out raid battles as yesterday's content. I really disagree with that, because I feel like with raiding, it's just something that a lot of players can get into, and I just feel like all they need to do is add more quality of life, tweak the rewards, and make it so that it can be further and further challenging the more you progress. If they continue to do that, I think raiding will be in a good place, and it's definitely going to allow Niantic and Pokemon GO to last for several decades. It's basically all there, just ready for them. But in any case, that's going to be it for this discussion video. I just wanted to share my thoughts regarding raid battles and talk about why it's so important, and also talk about why people continue to do raids. And these are some of the things that I really hope Niantic takes into consideration. I'm sure they are. I just think they're having difficulty cracking the formula on what to do with all of these different aspects of raiding. So yeah, hopefully they'll figure it out, because I would like to see raiding continue to do well and continue to give me different challenges and a lot of rewards. And I really do think it has the potential to do that. But let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. I know I just kind of rambled a bit in this video, but I really want to hear what the community is thinking regarding raid battles. Is it something that you still feel is relevant, or do you feel like it's starting to fall off? What would you like to see Niantic do to make raiding a much better experience? Definitely share those thoughts in the comments below. And yeah, let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you ended up enjoying it, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And real quick, let me give a shout out to all my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, the absolute best way you could do so is by joining my Patreon. And if you become a paid Patreon member, you get a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. So when it comes to stuff like remote raids and the friendship system, if you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you could do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow. And with all that said, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.